The colonel's laugh cut through the room like a blade, sharp and mocking. "You expect me to believe that?" He scoffed, leaning back in his chair, as though the very air were his to command. His chest swelled with authority, but his eyes carried disdain. Around him, the officers shifted uncomfortably, some glancing down at their polished boots, others fixing their gaze on the distant wall. At the center of the storm stood a woman, silent, motionless, her hands folded neatly before her. She did not flinch at the colonel's cruelty, nor did she lower her gaze. She stood still, as if the weight of his scorn was no heavier than the desert wind she had once endured. The colonel laughed again, this time louder, sharper. "An excuse, nothing more. You've wasted our time. You claim injuries, yet here you stand." His voice was laced with disbelief, his tone dismissive, almost triumphant in its cruelty. But the room, though silent, knew something he did not. Her name was Captain Eleanor Ward. Once, her steps had pounded the sand of Kandahar, her breath shallow beneath a searing sun, her hands steady as life drained from men too young to die. A medic, they called her. But in truth, she had been more than that, an anchor in chaos, a bearer of burdens that would have crushed others. There had been the convoy, the day when laughter turned to screaming, when steel shredded into fragments of fire. She remembered the taste of dust and blood as she dragged 3 men from twisted wreckage, the sting of molten metal embedding itself into her skin. She never screamed. She had no time. Her body burned, but her hands did not falter. She pressed torn flesh back together, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. And when the Black Hawk lifted them into the sky, she stayed behind. Alone, kneeling in sand, surrounded by silence, blood on her uniform that was not her own. The scars she bore afterward were not medals pinned by generals, but jagged reminders carved into her flesh. Yet here, in the sterile glow of a military office, all of that was invisible. What remained visible was only her silence and the colonel's scorn. "Captain Ward," he sneered, "your absence from the review is noted. Your claim of medical exemption is unconvincing." His hand slapped the file closed with finality. "You dishonor this uniform with excuses." The words struck like bullets, not for their truth, for they had none, but for the injustice they carried. Around the table, silence reigned. Not one of the men beside him rose to speak. Authority was a chain, and fear its lock. Elena did not respond. Her silence was not weakness, but defiance. She had learned long ago that dignity requires no explanation. She simply stood, spine straight, gaze unwavering. The colonel chuckled again, and the room, by its very stillness, betrayed its complicity. It was then, just as the weight of injustice seemed unbearable, that a shift stirred. A younger officer, barely past 30, adjusted his collar. His eyes lingered on Elena, narrowing as though trying to recall something. And then recognition dawned. He had seen her before, not here, not in this polished room, but in sand and fire. He remembered the day his Humvee had turned into shrapnel and screams, the day hands not his own had pulled him from death's grip. And there, under layers of dust, blood, and courage, had been her face. He had thought it a memory blurred by shock. But now, here she stood, alive, silent, unflinching. The officer rose slowly, deliberately. The colonel frowned, irritation flashing across his features. "Lieutenant, you will sit." But the man's words cut through, steady and clear. "Sir, with respect, she has nothing to prove." His voice did not tremble. "I was there. Kandahar, 2014. If I am breathing today, it is because Captain Ward refused to leave me in the wreckage." The colonel's laughter died, but still his lips curled in disbelief. A soldier's loyalty is admirable, Lieutenant. But her scars are not visible. The air grew heavier, the silence thicker. And then, without a word, Elena moved. She pulled back the cuff of her sleeve, revealing a jagged line running across her forearm. Another tug. And a faint map of shrapnel revealed itself, etched like lightning into her skin. The colonel's smirk faltered. She did not speak. She did not need to. The scars spoke for her. The room shifted in an instant. The officers who had once stared at the floor now raised their heads. Silence transformed, not complicity, but respect. Eyes that had avoided hers now locked with quiet reverence. And in that silence, 3 words seemed to echo though unspoken. Dignity needs no defense. The colonel's face drained of color, his authority stripped bare. For the first time, his voice wavered. I did not know. Still, Elena said nothing. She simply rolled down her sleeve, the scars disappearing beneath fabric, as if to remind them all that true sacrifice never demands recognition. The lieutenant, however, gave voice to what everyone now felt. She carries more honor in her silence than any medal could ever display. And with that, the tide turned, one by one. The officers stood not in defiance of the colonel, but in recognition of the woman before them. Their silence was no longer cowardice, it was respect. The colonel, once loud with scorn, was now quiet. His laughter had dissolved into shame. Authority had lost to honor, and arrogance had bowed to truth. Elena did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply turned. Her steps measured, leaving behind a silence far louder than any defense she could have spoken. In the hallway beyond, the young lieutenant caught up, his voice low but resolute. Captain Ward, they'll never laugh again. She paused, eyes steady, her words finally breaking the silence with a weight that would linger in memory. A scar is not a weakness. It is proof I stood where others could not. And so, the story closed not with applause, nor with triumph shouted from rooftops, but with something greater. The quiet, unshakable victory of dignity. For those who watched, for those who listened, one truth remained. Honor is often silent. And silence is often the loudest answer of all. Every day, countless men and women walk among us, carrying scars the world cannot see. Some are carved into flesh, others into memory, all reminders of battles fought for freedoms many take for granted. Respect is not given to uniforms or titles, it is earned by sacrifice. By silent strength, by standing when the world laughs. Wherever you are watching from, take a moment to honor those whose battles remain unseen. Share this story if it touched you. Tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe in honoring the silent heroes among us, subscribe for more stories that remind us dignity needs no defense.